when you spread joy like that, people want to just unite and work together better. They don't want to divide. So then the soul diminishing is the opposite. It divides people, it isolates them, it makes them hate other groups. It encourages vice. It tells people that, to mistrust everybody.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization Show, the home of Googleization Nation, where we talk with HR and business thought leaders about the crazy shift going on all around us and explore the disruptive convergence of technology, business, and people. Here are your hosts, Ira Wolf and Jason Cochran.
Hey, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization, a show from the People Forward Network. I'm Ira Wolf, and thank you for being part of Googleization Nation.
And I'm Jason Cochran. If you think this is just another podcast, think again. We're the voice of the most important, crucial conversations that are confronting business leaders and people today. Our goal is to bring you ways to reimagine your tomorrow and explore the impact and convergence of business, technology, and people.
On this episode, you're going to hear from leadership and competency expert Marie Gervais. Marie has a brand new book out. We're excited to learn a lot more about it. I've read part of it, The Spirit of Work, Timeless Wisdom and Current Realities. For every business leader, HR professional, and manager asking how they can put the humanity back into HR, you're going to want to stop right now and listen. So just let us set the stage here a little bit. Gallup released their State of the Workplace 2022 report last week, and it's creating quite a buzz in the HR and leadership world. The results are really eye-opening and jaw-dropping. So according to the world's workers, say that twice fast, world's workers, 60% of employees are emotionally detached. 60% of employees are emotionally detached at work. 19% said they are miserable. 31% reported they were angry yesterday when they took the survey. 57% said they're not thriving and not engaged, and only 9% said they are thriving and engaged. So it reminds me of a quote that comedian George Carlin once said. Oh, you hate your job? Why didn't you say so? There's a support group for that. It's called Everybody. They meet at the bar. Now, Carlin's joke works, not because it's funny, but because it's true. And if anyone needed a reason to fix this, listen up. According to Gallup, business units with engaged workers have 23% higher profit compared with business units with miserable workers.
Ira, I absolutely love the George Carlin reference. And sadly, those findings you just shared from Gallup, those are alarming. And I think it just goes to show that this uninspiring sentiment toward employers, it's not just happening in low-wage jobs anymore. I mean, just yesterday, if you were watching headlines, heard the news, there's thousands of Southwest airline pilots who are protesting outside of Love Field in Dallas yesterday, and they're protesting because of being overworked and understaffed. And then just this last weekend, where there were thousands of flights canceled and delayed, it just feels like there's a new inflation, labor market or supply chain issue, gas prices, baby formula, restaurant, drive-through lines. It's almost like every month there's something new that comes up that's a disruption to our lives. And I'm not sure if you or many of our listeners use Reddit at all, but there's a community there that I follow called Anti-Work. That's the name of the community, is Anti-Work on Reddit. There are now more than 2 million members of this community on Reddit, Ira. And to put that in context, that would be nearly equivalent to the whole population of Houston, Texas. And here's a short description of that community. It's a community for those who want to end work, are curious about ending work, want to get the most out of a work-free life, want more information on anti-work ideas, and want personal help with their own jobs and work-related struggles. And some of the things that you'll see in that community that get posted are things that support unionization, they support social enterprise, stakeholder capitalism, and decreasing the ever-growing wage gap between CEOs and staff, just to name a few of the topics. And it makes me think that the name of the community shouldn't be anti-work, It should be anti-sucky work environments. Most of these folks aren't averse to meaningful work where they're treated fairly and set up for success. What they're averse to are toxic cultures and bosses. And so I can't wait to hear from Marie today as she dives into her new book, The Spirit of Work, to help us reimagine what work can and should be in our lives.
And before we bring Marie on, I just want to remind everybody that if you're listening to Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization, you can now get SHRM credits, anywhere between a half to a full credit. You can, for those who are watching, let me see if I can find this just a second here. There we go. You can basically look at the QR code, take a snapshot of that, or you can reach out to Jason or myself, and we will be happy to send you the link to fill out a quick evaluation form, and then we will send you the activity ID. And then also we want to thank everybody who is already a member of Googlization Nation. And if you're not, please reach out to us, and you can go to googlizationnation.com and subscribe to our community, and we really appreciate that. And then finally, if you like what you hear, please let us know and let others know by leaving a rating and a review on your favorite podcast platform, whether it's Apple or Spotify or Amazon. So really appreciate that. So this seems like a pretty good time to bring our guest on. Dr. Marie Gervais holds a PhD in culture and learning in the workplace. Through her leadership training, she's coached more than 500 supervisors, managers, business owners for business and career success. She hosts a really good podcast, so I encourage you to go listen to it. It's called the Culture and Leadership Connections Podcast, and it has interviews with a whole variety of diverse leaders in a variety of in many different professions. She has a lot of publications. She's across different industries and academic journals. Topics include some of our favorite, Jason: future of work, workplace communication, productivity, and psychological safety in the workplace. So Marie is a perfect guest to be on Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. So let's give a warm Googlization Nation welcome to Dr. Marie Gervais. And I'm going to take that away so we can see her face. Welcome, Marie.
Thank you for inviting me to be a part of your absolutely fabulous show.
We're excited to have you, Marie. This is going to be a fun discussion today, and one obviously that's very timely with everything going on in the world right now.
Yes.
So Marie, let's just dive into it, because your book title was interesting when we first connected, and I don't remember how we actually did that, but The Spirit of Work. And I had to think what that meant. But as you heard the introduction and many things going on, the spirit of work is sort of left. It's in sad shape, and I particularly like the subtitle, Timeless Wisdom and Current Realities, because there's a lot of employers living in la la land, or many employers think they're living in la la land, because it's almost unrecognizable where it is. So tell us a little bit what led up to writing the book, the inspiration for that, and then what Spirit of Work is about.
Well, although I didn't know it at the time, about 30 years ago, I had an experience with reflecting on work that just led me to think I have to write about this. And the experience was that I was in a graduate course using arts-based research to communicate in ways that affect people's hearts, not just their minds. And so I had to put together something that involved no language and photography, and then something that would involve multimedia. So I interviewed 2 immigrant families who did not speak English, and I didn't speak their language, by looking at their family photo albums. And in those family photo albums, they had lots of pictures of them going through, various different career moments, and with their work crews and whatever. And through sign language and more photos, we ended up putting this piece together. And then the other piece was me reflecting on a very bad experience that I had with an employer, where I was hired to basically groom somebody else. I didn't know it, to groom somebody else into a position that paid 5 times more than what I was paid to train the guy. And he was subsequently fired 6 months later for misconduct and many other things, because I didn't create the misconduct. He was a bad hire. And I knew that from the beginning. And several times said, I have some red flags about this guy, but the employer just said, oh, keep working with him because you have a great job coming up in the future. And then, of course, I lost my job and he got promoted and subsequently fired. And so I had this really bad experience. And so I did this multimedia presentation with two work, and then I had two red hands, painted red hands against a brick wall, and like that you can't get through. You expect to be working and you can't get through. And the immigrant families that came to see their display spent about 5 minutes on theirs, and then they spent all this time looking at mine. And so did all the other people that had come to see the display from the chorus, because there were a lot of people that were there, and they were talking about how much angst they had about work and how they'd been deceived and betrayed, and people were crying. And the immigrants who, we're still connecting through sign language because Google Translate hadn't been invented yet. And they're going, their heart, and they're going to me, my heart, and they're going like this, and they're going like this, and they're going, we get it. And I thought, this is kind of a transformative moment. And that happened 30 years ago, and the book then took place a lot later.
And so, Marie, with that experience, then you created this idea of the spirit of work. And can you help dive us into some of the meatier components of that book in terms of what we're in right now and all the shift that we're dealing with around the world regarding supply chain, regarding people's sentiment toward work? What are some of the pieces in your book that can help us get things back on the right track?
Well, in the very beginning, I go through a little brief history of what went wrong with work, which is starting with the Industrial Revolution. We started to see people as disposable, commodifiable entities. And it just went downhill from there. But there's more in the book. But and that's where we stopped. And maybe we never really did see people who were not like us as people with souls and minds and hearts and bodies that mattered, and belonging to communities that had anything to teach us. So we've probably never been there, but there was maybe some modicum of at least the people that are in my in-group are worthy of respect. I don't know if we've reached a breaking point there as well. So the Spirit of Work offers 3 different perspectives to help us see work from different lenses. So the first perspective, which is the timeless wisdom part, is about it's sacred texts from the world religions, as many as I could find, that pertained to work and work attitudes and what we need to do to succeed at work. And I was absolutely amazed by what I found. For example, things from Hinduism, which is like 6,000 years old, that if we'd even applied one of those principles, one of them is called to pack up and move on. Don't hold on to old stories. This is something people are talking about in all of the self-development literature right now, and that's 6,000 years it's been in existence. We haven't put it into practice yet. So just to give you an idea, so that's a really significant part. And then the other part is, what has science taught us about what we need to be well and whole at work? And then the third part is, what business stories can help us see what we shouldn't do and what we should do. Where are the glimmers of hope? So instead of just dissing bad employers or just saying these guys are perfect, it's more like going to the middle road and looking for both. So those 3 lenses together comprise the focus of the book. It has a lot of stories in it. It has really useful frameworks that you can apply practically as well. And then I look at 5 main topics. First one is bring your soul to work, bring your mind to work, bring your body to work, bring your heart to work. And you are bringing your community to work. Do you know who you're bringing? So, and that's where we talk about inequity and justice and courage and things like that at the very end. So, so that's the book in a nutshell.
That's great. And I'm curious, often when we talk about these types of subjects, Ira and I and most of our listeners, they're on board, but are there ever people who are skeptical of thinking, oh, this is too much heart stuff, in terms of executives being like, yeah, but is this actually going to affect, like bottom line numbers? Have you ever run across executives like that or companies like that are really kind of reactive to doing this type of work? And if you have you come across any helpful tactics or tools that kind of help get them over the hump to realize this is your business strategy? Your people are the most important thing. So have you ever run across any kind of like resistance? And then what have you done to help get over that with certain companies or executives?
Oh, of course. The biggest resistance is just people being dismissive and saying, oh yeah, who needs that? The other one would be, yeah, but do people even care? But that mostly doesn't happen when before COVID hit, when I first started doing the research for the book. That's when I got some more pushback. And I said, well, we'll see what the book is like. And then if you're interested, you can read it. And if not, I mean, it's you have the freedom of choice. You don't have to invest any time in it. And I didn't try to convert them to my point of view, because that's usually a useless endeavor anyway. And basically, if you look at things from a marketing perspective, you're looking for people who are your target audience, not the people who don't care. So you can spend a lot of time trying to bring someone over who's not really going to be interested, or you can look for the people that care and then build from there. So that's basically what I did. But people ask me at every single interview, so what are you doing to bring the CEOs over? What are you doing to pull these people in? What are you doing to convert everybody? And I'm going, nothing, because people will come along when they're ready. And if you start with yourself and start with the people that are near you, that's where all the action takes place. Before COVID, I got more of that sort of thing. But since COVID, people are hungry. They're just so hungry. They go, oh, I can hardly wait. Is there a book club? Can I buy 5? I had this moment and I feel like I'm a different person, and it's amazing. I mean, people call me to ask about supervisory leadership for people that are working in a mine, and then they go, I wanted to talk to you about the meaning of life. And like, that never happened to me before, but it does now. So I think there's been a shift in people's consciousness. That probably doesn't answer your question, but that's what I've noticed.
No, it does beautifully. And I think it ties into a lot of the data that Ira just shared with us around the state of the workforce that Gallup just released last week.
Yeah.
It's interesting, Jason, that you brought that up, and then Marie, your perspective on that as well. I was in a conversation yesterday with, actually, he's the owner of a HR tech company. And he said, by the way, were you at the annual SURE meeting that they just held down in New Orleans? And I didn't go this year. And I said, well, how was it? What did you think? And he said, I was really disappointed that when you walked around the floor of all the vendors that are out there, and it really is that one meeting where everybody comes together. He said, it was all this fluff stuff. He says, I don't get it. I mean, it was talking about diversity and inclusion and wellness and, bringing the whole person and putting the H back in humanity. He says, I went to see all the HR tech stuff and it wasn't there. So there's obviously, it's adjacent to answer your question, is obviously there's a lot of people who resist it, or people that have their mindset that either technology or the good old days are going to return. We're going to get back to normal, and people will come to them senses and realize that a job is just a good paycheck. We pay you well, we cover your health care, and so be happy.
Well, first off, there never were any good old days. That's just a figment of our imagination. And if we had a good moment, and it was probably particular to our race and social status, that allowed us that opportunity. So, and then we can never go back. There's no going back to anything. You don't go back to being in your mother's womb. You don't go back. You only move forward. And if you stop moving, you die. So going back is so impossible, because even just stopping moving means you die. So moving forward is the only way. And so it's if this is what's in the data, if people are talking about diversity, if people are talking about wellness, well, that's the path forward. And if I refuse to admit it, then I'm in the stagnation place that it's heading towards being obsolete.
No, I don't want to get too off track here, but you're absolutely right. I mean, I preach that all the time about going back to normal. There is no such thing. And I gave a presentation out basically in Jason's home state, Indiana, not too long ago, and it was really interesting in the reviews, because they talked about, in a way, is going back to normal. When we talk about that, would we go back? And I talked about women going back to what their place was in that time. If you went back 50 or 60 years ago, their place is that only 1.5% of the population who went to college was women. Only 1 out of 3 women were actually in the workplace. Women didn't hold degrees. Women couldn't go to Ivy League schools. And one of the responses I got was, why were you demeaning women? Like, we've made so much progress. And I go, I don't understand the comment. I mean, really, it was, you've made this much comment. Why would you want to go back to the way it was when you talked about that? We talked about lynchings. I mean, segregation. I mean, there was a lot of really ugly things in our history. That why would you want to go back to that? And we want to be selective. and and what the experience is for people who are poor or live in a city or rural. Normal for urban was very different. City dwellers was very different from what normal was for people living in the mid states or even in Canada. I mean, our cultures, our life, our even about gun control, about education, about violence. Very, very different cultures. So what's normal in Canada, where your home is, Marie, is very different than what the culture is in many parts of the United States.
And perhaps we haven't made that much progress anyway, because what used to be normal in schools was that teachers and parents would beat their children.
Yeah, it's absolutely sad. So we need to bring back the spirit of work, but it's very interesting because the whole idea of work related to a job of going to work, we as a civilization, or maybe a society, not as a civilization, but a society, especially in most developed countries, think of this was when man from Adam and Eve is they went to work. The concept of work and jobs is really only started in the industrial age, maybe in the mid 1850s. Later than that, when they built factories, because people didn't go to work; they got up and they farmed.
Yeah.
There were a few people that had stores and retail, and maybe they went to work. But our whole life was not geared around getting up and going to work and getting a paycheck.
It was also geared towards what was necessary for survival and what was purposeful. So, and if you just even look at sort of cave dwellers, people made tools as soon as they had a little bit of safety from saber-toothed tigers. They made those tools beautiful. They didn't make a tool that was ugly or that they'd mass produce. They made a beautiful, useful tool that was going to last. So it's the idea is work needs to be purposeful, and it also has to meet our needs. So that's part of the spirit of work, is that we need to have those two things in balance.
So I mentioned before about HR tech, and obviously technology is everywhere. We're using technology now. We wouldn't be able to do this. I remember 21 years ago, I had an AM radio show, and it consisted of picking up the phone at 7 a.m. in the morning and interviewing you or a guest. And then 2 weeks later, I'd get the cassette tape of the recording, and then I had to copy that. I mean, that was early on. So I'm grateful that we can do this live and we can record it and have this conversation, and it's a synchronous experience, and we can get so many more listeners than we did before. But even healthcare, I mean, we won't go into the specifics, but we were talking about healthcare before. I mean, we're living longer lives, and procedures that were either rare or risky, are now routine. They're literally drive-through, and it allows us to do everything from have longer quality of lives, to be able to see better, to feel better, to experience life to its fullest. And yet, when it comes to work, we seem to still go back to the old-fashioned ways. And there are many managers and leaders, and that concept of paying by the hour, or paying, or what even hours are. Set hours. I mean, there's this really struggle now with in-person, basically coming to the office. We want to go back to having a set schedule, where work doesn't get done on a set schedule. The only reason it was a set schedule before is when sun rose and sun set, because it was an agricultural base. Schools are still based on an agricultural time clock. You get up when the sun rises, and you send them home, because that's when they had to go back into the fields. That's long gone. But there's a role for technology. I mean, there's benefits to using technologies. Where do you see technology fitting into this spirit of work?
Well, you don't have any trouble convincing me about technology and how important it is. I'm grateful every day for all the technology that I have at my fingertips. So that the thing for me, though, is that technology, when we first realized that we could use technology to manipulate and control people's buying patterns, then and that we could actually encourage addictions, then that was really the whole thrust. And I remember a number of years ago when I was looking for an investor for a manager development game that I was trying to create, that people kept saying, well, it's got educational value. Who cares about education? If we can't addict them, we're not going to put any money into it. And that has changed because people started to see that they could use technology for healthcare. They could use technology for all sorts of things. I mean, think about doing haptic surgery, millions of miles away. There was that. And then now there's a huge thrust for using technology for good, for helping people to change their habits. For example, learning to take medication on a regular basis and things like that. And their belief systems. And so I think that technology is really exciting and interesting, but it's not a default to solve problems. And what we've tended to do is to go, we have a problem, let's throw software at it. We have a problem, let's buy a new machine. Let's update our laptops. Maybe we're just not using the right social media. And that's the wrong default. The first default is this meaningful and purposeful for people? Can they engage with it? Are they excited about it? Does it meet their needs and the needs of the company? And how does this work? And you're basically writing it out and sketching it in and trying it. And then you go, this is the technology tool that would help. What? It hasn't been invented yet? Let's get on that, right? So, but if you start by saying, let's just throw some technology at it, which is still, I think, the attitude of a lot of software engineers, because they love developing the technology, it doesn't necessarily meet the need. So we have to start with what's the need? What do we want to see change? How can we experiment with it first? And then find the right technology for the right fit. So that would be my take on it.
Marie, I love that. And I know we've got to take a quick break here in just a minute, but digital transformation, someone who works in a technology company, I just want to echo your sentiment there and say, listeners, listen to what Marie is telling you. If you're an HR leader and you're responsible for buying technology that's used for initiatives and programs that come out of your office, your department, don't just go out and buy a technology solution that does like recognition or something that does performance management. Take a step back before you start looking at vendors and put together a digital transformation strategy to shape the vision of what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And then try to find as few solutions as possible to make it a better experience for the people who use it. Because typically what happens, Ira and I talked about this in another episode, is just like you go to CVS and you buy one pack of gum and you end up with a receipt that's like 3 feet long. That's what the HR tech stack looks like, because many times the strategy is disjointed. It's more of a reactionary approach of, hey, we went to a convention and we heard we should be doing some stuff on engagement. We also heard we should be doing DEI. We also heard we should be doing stuff around one-to-ones. We also heard we should be doing fill in the blank. And then before you know it, you've got a whole bunch of different tech stacks and everything is completely disjointed.
And they don't talk to each other. And can you communicate with your sites in other places around the world? Because there's a digital divide as well. And so all of this needs to be taken into consideration before making a purchase.
So true.
We are talking with Marie Gervais. We're talking about the spirit of work and jobs and technology and the future of work. If you're not part of Googlization Nation yet, we encourage you to be there. You can go to googlizationnation.com. A reminder, if you are a member of SHRM and you'd like to get some credits, you can do that by listening to Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. You can either reach out to Jason or myself about the link, or you can go to rebrand.ly/GGG SHRM credit. That's rebrand.ly/GGG SHRM credit. There's a short form there. Fill it out just to prove that you were listening to that, getting some good points, like from our guest today, Marie Gervais, about the spirit of work. Just want to make sure that you're just not getting the credit, but do you actually learn something or tried to learn something? And we are going to take a very quick break. We will be back in 1 minute. And when we come back, I'm going to ask Marie, I'm going to give you a heads up here, Marie. You mentioned something. I can't remember if I got this from the book or one of your notes about the difference between soul enhancing and soul diminishing thoughts, words, and actions. I like that. Soul enhancing or soul diminishing, because it seems that there's a lot of soul diminishing going on in the workplace. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
For most of us, change is freaking terrifying. And unfortunately, there's no app to adapt. That might change in the not-so-distant future. But for now, we're on our own. That means we can either accept our default future or reimagine our tomorrow. For those of you who choose default, good luck. Just remember, there's no pause button for change. You can't turn back the clock. And there's no get out of jail free card in this age of perpetual uncertainty. Like it or not, change will happen all around us. And that change is not becoming just more disruptive and frequent, but volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, or VUCA. Fortunately, you can make change work for you and turn it into your personal and competitive advantage. Reimagine your future to one in which you're living with purpose, you're happy, and you're growing, thriving, and flourishing. If you're ready to rewrite your next life chapter and regain control of your destiny in this never normal world, your journey starts here. Contact the leader in adaptability and making change work for you, your team, and your organization. Ira S. Wolf, adaptability.expert.
And welcome back, everybody, to Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. We are talking about the spirit of work with Marie Gervais. I want to thank everybody for listening, for being part of Googlization Nation. Just a reminder, you can get your SHRM credits by reaching out to Jason or myself or going to rebrand.ly/GGG SHRM credit. If you are interested in, again, we were talking a lot in the first part of the show about what there is no going back to normal. Everybody needs to adapt and change. We're certainly going through a lot of shift. I love anybody who talks about shift, and that's actually part of Marie's website name. She talks about shift all the time. Part of that is having a growth mindset, and a growth mindset being aqplusmindset.com. So if you go up there, we have a quick demo that you can also go through part of our coaching program for free and see what it's like, and hopefully you like it and want to go through the rest. Marie, right before we left off, I gave you a heads up. I was intrigued by your soul enhancing versus soul diminishing thoughts, words, and actions. Can you give us some examples of what that means and what's happening?
Sure. First off, that's one of the things that is practical about the book that people can apply. So soul enhancing actions are things that expand your potential and the potential of the people around you and the potential of the environment around you. And the soul diminishing actions constrict it. So you can see that whenever people want to control, bully, or declare war on other people, they're constricting. Everything they do is constricting. So it's aggressive, it shrinks people, it doesn't allow people to express themselves. Only certain people are allowed to speak, and they only are allowed to say certain things. You know right away that that's soul diminishing. And when people can't speak up at work, it's soul diminishing. When what they say isn't listened to, it's soul diminishing. When you go to soul enhancing, it's like people have the freedom to speak up and everybody is interested. And when they say something, it gets listened to and recorded and used, not attributed to somebody else or because of their status in the organization. So that's just a little bit, but it's more than that. It's also about choosing yourself to do soul enhancing actions. So when you're thinking about doing something, is this something that's going to produce a soul enhancing result? If I say it, and if not, maybe I shouldn't say it. So it's kind of like the next take on, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. It's not that you shouldn't not say anything. It's not that you ignore reality or that you don't state it as required when necessary, but what it is that you're focusing on the positive. So one way to do that is to say, well, what virtues do you appreciate in the other person? Your honesty is just wonderful. I appreciate that so much. Your candor, thank you for showing me candor. Thank you for your courage and your passion in stating what you just said. That's one way of looking at it. Another way is to say, suspending judgment and say, what don't I know? Ask myself a question. What don't I know about this situation that's causing me to feel defensive? So those kinds of things allow you to make more and more soul enhancing choices. And when you do that, you start thinking, speaking, and acting in ways that are more helpful, that expand people. You can see the results around you. You feel better. You feel happy. That your well-being hormones start reproducing quickly inside of you, and other people's the same. You can feel it, you can see it, and you can also see the results. And in the very beginning, when you said, people that are engaged at work and enjoy their jobs, the companies are 23% more profitable than where people are miserable. And I'm sure it's actually higher if you had all the necessary measures in place, because really you're when you spread joy like that, people want to just unite and work together better. They don't want to divide. So then the soul diminishing is the opposite. It divides people, it isolates them, it makes them hate other groups. It encourages vice. It tells people that, to mistrust everybody, or to attack people around you, or to call your politician names. I'm driving to the home where my dad is in, his Alzheimer's home that he's in. All along the road, there are signs saying rude things about what people would like to do to our politicians. I mean, how would you like it if you drove by and that was your name on those signs? Yeah, that's soul diminishing, right? So how about saying something like, I'm really rooting for the government to make, excellent united decisions that are going to make a difference in people's lives. Go government, instead of, so-and-so, I'd like to do this destructive act to them, So because we're so used to doing those kinds of things, we don't realize how harmful it is. To give you a tangible example of how that works, you can do a kinesiology test where you push down on someone's arm, and it will remain strong if you think a positive thought, and it will weaken and just drop if you think a negative thought. So if you think about them, and I demonstrated this in a high school with 1,000 students. I picked the most buff guy in there and asked him to come up. We tested his strength first so that we could prove that he was strong. And then I asked everyone to just think, I don't like that guy. And they did that, and he could not hold his arm up. He became completely weak. And then we said, I love this guy. He's the best guy in the school, right? And he was so strong that I hung and swung back and forth on his arm, which he couldn't do previously. So this is how important it is for us to think thoughts that are soul enhancing, even if we don't say anything.
That is so powerful. I'm from really very naive and remotely familiar with kinesiology, but I've seen it in action so many times. With that, I remember when they introduced that back in healthcare. Just of your physical strength and how stress, impacts that, and it absolutely is. It's amazing. So that's a great example and a great story. Marie, we're almost out of time. I mean, these sessions, our conversations go so quickly, but we like to ask, because I know as a guest, oftentimes it's like, oh, I wish they would have asked me this question. So is there anything we didn't ask you that we should have, that you would like our listeners to know?
How can I use this book in my workplace? I think that the spirit of work, because it has some practical models and simple things that you can do, like choose to have soul enhancing thoughts. It's something that could be used on a lunch and learn, or a presentation, or a workplace book club. Lots of workplaces have a book club. I spoke recently with a manufacturing CEO who had all 500 of his employees read a book, even though they might not have since high school. And they read the book, and they participated in multiple small group discussions to discuss each of the chapters. And then they made some significant changes to their company based on what people came up with for applications. And I think the same thing could be done with my book. How could you use it in your workplace? Lunch and learn.
Well, I think that's perfect, Marie, because we touched a lot on what people can do, in terms of their responsibilities of the things that are within their control of what they can do. But your book also provides insights and practical tips on what organizations need to be doing in terms of work environment as well, because it's a two-way street in order to get to where we need to go. Yes, people need the skills, but also we need organizations to make some organizational intervention and change their culture in certain ways to help people get there too. So I love hearing that your resources work on both of those levers.
Oh, Jason, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I was going to say that earlier. And that is that this is not just another mindfulness book about how you can be a more whole person, which are all good, and I love them and I read them lots myself. But it also talks about the individual, the community, and the institutions that are involved in us having the spirit of work. So thank you for bringing that up.
And it is time for our lightning round. So we're going to learn a few things about Marie that probably none of us know, unless her personal, I guess her family and friends. But Jason, you want to take the lead on this?
Absolutely. All right, Marie, is there a nickname that you had when you were a kid that you'd love to share with our listeners?
There's a nickname which I really hated. My first name is Alexandra, and my parents used to call me Lexi, which you can imagine got turned into some other things that were not so pleasant. I was really happy to drop that nickname.
Right. Well, with my last name, my 8-year-old, is currently going through some interesting things at school of some interesting combinations of things with my last name. So totally
I
get
feel your child's pain.
it. Yes. How about if you won the lottery today, what's the first thing you'd do?
I would establish a foundation that would help to create opportunities for people in marginalized communities to start and sustain businesses.
I love that. Helping entrepreneurs chase the dream.
Yeah.
And it aligns to the work that you're doing as well. So I love that. How about what would some of your classmates be surprised to see about you now?
They'd be surprised that they'd be surprised that I'm a business owner, and they'd be surprised that I wrote a book. Probably they'd be surprised about both those things. I don't think they'd be surprised that I have 4 kids and 5 grandsons. But yeah, those two things they might be surprised at. They'd probably really be surprised that I have a podcast.
That's great. And then how about, do you have like a word of the year, or maybe a favorite book other than your own that you have written?
You know, I actually have a new favorite book. It's called 7 Forms of Respect by Julie Pham. And yeah, I really like it because it digs into what respect means across cultures, across different, and how to work in a diverse culture where different people have different expectations of what it feels like to be respectful. And then since I'm holding up books, this is what mine looks like, The Spirit of Work.
Perfect.
Yeah,
And
so
then
I think respect is the word for the year.
I love that. And then last one, we're going to ask you to be Nostradamus. Let's say we're talking a year from now. What do you think we'll be talking about?
You want the positive or the negative?
Both.
The positive is that we're going to be talking about elder care and aging population in ways we haven't thought of before. And the negative will be increased war and climate change issues that are forcing migrations. Those are the ones that I'm seeing strongly. Also, the positive will be children and youth moving up into things that we never thought possible that they could do. And then conversely, more mental health issues with youth.
Yep, absolutely. I could totally see that in a year's time. Well, Marie, we can't thank you enough for joining us and Googlization Nation. We know that you're very busy, but what are some additional ways? We've been having your contact information scroll down at the bottom, but what are some additional ways people can get in touch with you and learn more about your work?
Well, they can connect with me on LinkedIn. That's probably a great way to get going. And I'm in the process of making a few changes to my LinkedIn so it aligns more closely with what I'm doing with the book and things like that. But connect with me on LinkedIn is great. They can go to my website. They can purchase the book. Just type in The Spirit of Work, Marie Gervais. I have a sister-in-law named, her name is Michelle Marie Gervais, and she is also an author. So you're going to see both of our books when you type that up. So yeah, we complementary. She does complementary health. So we're related, but 2 different authors.
Perfect. Thank you.
That's excellent. Marie, it's been a pleasure. Hopefully we'll continue this conversation. Thanks for being here today. And thanks for sharing this all about the spirit of work.
Thank you for your great questions and comments. Much appreciated.
Be safe there. And I was thinking when you were asking the questions, in fact, I was disappointed when you said that when driving down the road and you see the political signs. We thought Canada was this kind country.
Oh man.
That's what all my Canadian friends tell me. It's like, what's going on with you guys down south of the border? But apparently that's universal, right? So hopefully we'll see the same positives next year come across that. Hopefully that'll filter down through the border.
Yeah, like news flashes. Kindness to politicians reaches an all-time high.
Yeah.
We can dream.
Yeah.
It should be interesting since we'll be in the beginning stages next year of this time of all the campaigning going on for our next presidential election.
Right.
So should be interesting, and we'll definitely need more beyond work. We're going to need a lot of spirit.
Yeah.
And hopefully your message transcends that. So Marie, thank you very much for being part of the show today. Thanks for being part of Googlization Nation. And until next time.
Until next time.
Thank you, Marie.
Stay safe. Jason, super interesting. Again, refreshing. We've had some great guests. That seems to be our theme of talking about many different ways, making the connections back through the centuries, through different religions. I wrote that down in the beginning because we talk about this we talk about unlearning all the time, but it could be traced back to 6,000 years. The Hindu saying, don't hold on to your old stories.
Absolutely. That was a big takeaway for me too, Ira, was the journey of thinking that, the way we think about work now is not how over the history of time here on Earth, the majority of the way people thought about work. Like, it really is an industrial idea, and we've completely just centralized our lives around it. And sadly, for many people, as you were sharing at the beginning of the show, it's making them miserable. And so I hope that many of our listeners, if they're in a similar situation, that today's episode was really helpful for thinking through ways of what are the types of work that bring your soul alive and don't diminish it. And that it's not your fault. Like if you're working somewhere that just makes you feel drained and you get the Sunday scaries and you don't want to go in on Monday, it doesn't have to be that way. You can rethink work and its place in your life. And fortunately, there are plenty of companies that are figuring this out and are doing a great job out in the free agent marketplace of the labor market as it is now, that are getting the top talent. And so would love to see more of those organizations flourish, but also for that to become the norm so that we have more workplaces where people's souls do feel filled whenever they work.
Yeah, absolutely. And next week, we're going to just give everybody a heads up. We're going to take a little bit of a shift. We've been talking a lot about wellness and communication and the spirit of work. Next week, we're going to be bringing back another Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization alumni, Kevin Grossman. He's been on a number of times. Kevin's heads up the talent board and talks about candidate experience. He's the author of a new book, but we're going to find out what's going on with recruitment. I mean, we talk about retention and quits and wellness in the workplace, but what are some of the trends that employers are seeing with recruitment that are going on? So excited to hear about that and see what the compilation of a lot of the lessons that Kevin and the talent board have learned over the last few years. So stay tuned for next week for anybody that is looking for new people, retention, or not retention, but recruitment, talent acquisition. Again, you don't want to miss that next week's show, which will be right before and then we'll be taking a week off over the 4th. Hard to believe. We're at that mid-year point.
Awesome. Well, we want to thank you, Googleization Nation, for tuning in today. If you have not subscribed to our Googleization Nation community, we'd love for you to. And also, please like and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already done so. I'm signing off for now, Jason Cochran, and I'll send it over to Ira.
And I'm Ira Wolf, and thank you for being part of Googleization Nation. Thank you for listening to Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization. And until next time, don't let the shift hit your plans.